Yes, my boyfriend was bad in bed. Sorry, but someone had to say it. He had no rhythm, no clue, and honestly, it got exhausting pretending I was satisfied. So I brought in someone who did know what he was doing, my ex. Not to hurt him, but to show him. Like a live demonstration, a lesson, a surprise. But no, instead of being grateful, he acted like I'd stabbed him. Everyone's acting like I committed some kind of crime, when really, I was just trying to improve things for both of us. But apparently, trying to help your man makes you the bad guy these days. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. Now, let's get back to the story. It all started with one little surprise. I even told him it would be fun. How was I supposed to know he'd react like that? I'm Chelsea, 25, and I've always been the type of person who takes charge and makes things happen. When I see a problem, I find a solution. When something needs improvement, I improve it. That's how I've always approached relationships too, with honesty and directness about what works and what doesn't. My boyfriend Ryan and I had been together for about 6 months, and while he was sweet and attentive, there were definitely areas where he could use some guidance. He was inexperienced compared to my previous relationships, and I could tell he was insecure about it. He'd ask me constantly if I was satisfied, if there was anything he could do better, if I needed him to try different things. I kept telling him communication was key and that I'd let him know what I wanted. But Ryan seemed to learn better through demonstration than explanation, so I came up with what I thought was a creative solution to help him gain confidence and skill. I planned a special evening that would be educational and memorable for both of us. I told Ryan I had something fun and intimate planned for Friday night, something that would be unforgettable and help take our relationship to the next level. He was excited and kept asking for hints, but I wanted it to be a complete surprise. I spent the whole week building up the anticipation, telling him how much he was going to love it. Friday evening, I had Ryan come over for dinner first. I cooked his favorite meal, opened a nice bottle of wine, and kept the conversation light and flirty. I could tell he was nervous and excited about whatever I had planned. After dinner, I led him to the bedroom and told him to sit on the edge of the bed while I set everything up. I dimmed the lights and pulled out a silk blindfold I'd bought specifically for the occasion. I told Ryan that trust was an important part of what we were about to do, and that the blindfold would help him focus on the experience. He was smiling and completely trusting as I tied it gently over his eyes. I guided him to lie back on the bed and told him to just relax and be open to learning something new. Ryan was clearly excited and kept asking what we were going to do, but I told him patience was part of the experience. I said I was going to show him exactly what I needed and wanted from our intimate moments together. That's when I turned the lights back on and gestured for Marcus to come out of the closet where he'd been waiting. Marcus was my ex-boyfriend from about a year ago, someone who'd always been confident and skilled in ways that Ryan wasn't. I'd reached out to him earlier that week to explain the situation and ask if he'd be willing to help with a demonstration. Marcus was already undressed and ready to go, exactly as we'd planned. I looked at Ryan lying there with the blindfold on, completely trusting and vulnerable, and felt proud of myself for thinking of such a creative solution to our problem. I was about to give him the best learning experience possible. I walked over to the bed and said cheerfully, "Okay, Ryan, you can take the blindfold off now. Just watch and learn." I was smiling, excited to see his reaction to my thoughtful surprise. Ryan pulled off the blindfold, and his face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, shock, horror, disbelief, and finally something that looked like his soul leaving his body. He scrambled backward off the bed so fast he almost fell, staring between Marcus and me like he was having a nightmare. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. I started to explain that this was the surprise I'd been planning, that Marcus was here to show him some techniques that would make me happier. But Ryan wasn't listening to my explanation. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. Not of anything inappropriate, just of the setup. Me standing there in my lingerie, Marcus on the bed, the blindfold on the floor, evidence of what I'd planned for him. His hands were shaking as he took the photos, and he kept muttering, "This is insane! This is actually insane!" I tried to tell him he was overreacting and that this could be fun for all of us if he just gave it a chance. But Ryan was already grabbing his clothes and backing toward the door. The last thing he said before he left was, "You're completely out of your mind," and then he was gone. Marcus just shrugged and said this was more drama than he'd signed up for, got dressed, and left too. I stood there alone in my bedroom, wondering how something I'd planned so carefully had gone so wrong so quickly. I spent the next few days trying to understand why Ryan had reacted so dramatically to what I thought was a thoughtful gesture. I mean, he was always asking me to tell him what I wanted and how he could improve. So I showed him. How is that different from any other kind of teaching or demonstration? Men watch instructional videos about everything else: sports, cooking, home improvement. Why is this any different? I was providing him with a live tutorial from someone who actually knew what they were doing. If anything, I was being incredibly generous with my time and energy to help him become a better partner. I tried calling Ryan to explain my reasoning, but he'd blocked my number. When I showed up at his apartment, he wouldn't answer the door even though I could see his car in the parking lot. I left a note explaining that I'd only been trying to help and that his reaction was making me feel like I'd done something wrong when I was actually being supportive. The whole situation made me realize how sensitive and insecure men can be about this topic. Women are expected to be understanding when guys compare us to their exes or talk about other women they find attractive. But the moment we try to get some practical help from someone with experience, suddenly we're monsters. I kept thinking about how guys always say they want honest feedback and communication in relationships. Ryan had literally asked me dozens of times to tell him what I liked and what would make me happier. So when I provided him with a clear visual demonstration of exactly what I meant, he couldn't handle it. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became with his reaction. I'd put thought and planning into creating an educational experience that would benefit both of us. I'd reached out to Marcus specifically because he was skilled and experienced, not because I had feelings for him. It was clinical and informative, like a TED Talk, but more intimate. I started venting to my friends about how unreasonable Ryan was being, expecting them to agree that his reaction was over the top. But instead of supporting me, they got this weird look on their faces and started asking uncomfortable questions about whether I'd discussed this plan with Ryan beforehand. When I explained that it was supposed to be a surprise, they seemed even more concerned. My friend Jessica actually said she thought what I'd done was completely inappropriate and that she couldn't believe I'd ambushed Ryan like that. I tried to explain that it wasn't an ambush, it was a gift. But she just shook her head and changed the subject. Even my sister sided with Ryan when I told her what happened. She said I'd violated his trust and humiliated him in the worst way possible. I argued that I was trying to help him improve and that he should be grateful for the effort I'd put into finding a solution to our problem. But she said I was missing the point entirely. I started to wonder if maybe Ryan was just too insecure and immature to handle dating someone as confident and direct as me. Maybe I needed to find someone who could appreciate my honesty and willingness to take initiative in our relationship. Someone who wouldn't run away the moment things got a little unconventional. But deep down, part of me was starting to question whether I'd misread the situation somehow. I'd been so focused on solving what I saw as a problem that maybe I hadn't considered how Ryan would feel about my solution. Though honestly, how was I supposed to know he'd react like that when he'd been asking for guidance? Let me back up and explain how Ryan and I got to this point, because maybe it'll help you understand why I thought my plan made sense. When we first started dating 8 months ago, Ryan was this sweet, eager guy who was clearly smitten with me from day one. He'd never been in a serious long-term relationship, while I'd had several, including a pretty intense 2-year thing with Marcus. Ryan was attentive and romantic in ways I wasn't used to. He'd bring me flowers for no reason, plan elaborate date nights, and constantly tell me how amazing I was. It was flattering and sweet, but also kind of exhausting, because he tried so hard to impress me all the time. I could tell he was nervous about measuring up to my previous relationships. The physical side of our relationship started off okay, but it became clear pretty quickly that Ryan didn't have much experience. He was enthusiastic but clumsy, eager but unsure of himself. He'd constantly ask if what he was doing felt good, if I wanted him to try something different, if there was anything specific I needed from him. At first, I found his willingness to learn endearing. It was refreshing to be with someone who actually cared about my satisfaction, instead of just assuming they knew what they were doing. But after a few months, the constant questions and uncertainty started getting frustrating. I wanted him to just be confident and take charge sometimes. I started thinking about Marcus and how different things had been with him. Marcus never had to ask what I wanted because he just knew. He was confident and experienced and took control in ways that Ryan never did. Being with Marcus felt effortless and natural, while being with Ryan sometimes felt like I was teaching a class. Marcus and I had stayed in touch after our breakup, mostly through social media and occasional text messages. We'd ended things amicably when he moved across town for work, and there weren't any hard feelings between us. He'd flirt with me sometimes, but I'd never mentioned him to Ryan because I didn't see the point in making him insecure about an ex. About 2 months ago, Ryan had a particularly frustrating night where nothing seemed to work right, and he got so discouraged that he almost started crying. He kept apologizing and saying he knew he wasn't good enough for me, that he was trying his best, but obviously wasn't meeting my needs. I felt bad for him, but also annoyed that I had to constantly reassure him. That's when I started seriously thinking about ways to help Ryan gain confidence and skill. I considered suggesting he watch some educational videos or read some books, but I knew he'd be too embarrassed to admit he needed that kind of help. I wanted to find a way to teach him without making him feel inadequate. The idea for the demonstration came to me gradually over several weeks. I kept thinking about how much more confident Ryan would be if he could see exactly what good technique looked like, instead of just fumbling around trying to figure it out on his own. And who better to demonstrate than someone I knew was skilled and experienced? I texted Marcus casually one evening, asking how he was doing and catching up on his life. The conversation naturally turned flirty, like it always did with us, and I mentioned that I was dating someone new, but that he was pretty inexperienced. Marcus made some joking comment about offering to give lessons, and that's when the idea really crystallized. I spent the next few weeks planning out exactly how the evening would go. I wanted it to be a surprise because I knew Ryan would overthink it and get nervous if I told him ahead of time. I thought if I presented it as a fun, adventurous experience, he'd be more open to learning from it. Marcus was enthusiastic when I explained my plan. He said it sounded like fun and that he'd be happy to help educate Ryan about what I really wanted. We coordinated the timing and logistics, and I felt proud of myself for coming up with such a creative solution to our relationship challenge. Looking back, I can see that maybe I should have talked to Ryan about it first, but I was so excited about surprising him with something that would make our relationship better that I didn't really consider how he might react. I assumed he'd be grateful for the opportunity to learn from someone with more experience. The morning after my surprise backfired, I woke up to discover that Ryan had posted the photos he'd taken on social media. Not anything explicit or inappropriate, just pictures of the setup, me in my lingerie holding the blindfold, Marcus sitting on my bed, the general scene of what I'd planned. His caption was simple. "This is what a surprise looks like, apparently." My phone started buzzing immediately with notifications, comments, messages, reactions from friends and acquaintances who'd seen the post. Most of them were not supportive. People were calling me crazy, manipulative, cruel. Someone shared it to a local Facebook group, and then it started spreading beyond our immediate social circle. I tried calling Ryan to ask him to take the post down, but he'd blocked me on everything. I sent him messages through mutual friends, begging him to remove the photos, explaining that this was ruining my reputation and affecting my job. But he apparently told them that I should have thought about consequences before I decided to humiliate him. My work became incredibly uncomfortable within a few days. Someone had shared the post in a way that identified where I worked, and suddenly my coworkers were looking at me strangely and whispering when I walked by. My boss called me into her office to discuss whether my personal situation was affecting my professional image. I tried to explain to HR that the photos were taken out of context and that Ryan was just being vindictive after our breakup. But they said, regardless of the circumstances, having intimate photos circulating online with my name attached was creating an uncomfortable environment for other employees. My friends started distancing themselves from me as the story spread. People who'd known me for years suddenly became unavailable when I tried to make plans. Group chats went quiet when I participated, and I realized I'd been removed from several of them entirely. Even my close friends seemed embarrassed to be associated with me. The worst part was running into people I knew around town. Former classmates, neighbors, people from my gym. Everyone had seen the photos and formed opinions about what kind of person I was. I could feel them staring and whispering when they thought I wasn't looking. Some people were bold enough to make comments directly to me. I tried reaching out to Marcus to see if he could help explain to people that the situation wasn't as bad as it looked. But Marcus had completely ghosted me after that night. When I finally got through to him, he said he didn't want to get involved in the drama, and that this was exactly why he didn't do complicated situations anymore. Marcus told me he'd only agreed to help because he thought it would be a fun, no strings attached situation. When it turned into public humiliation and social media drama, he wanted nothing to do with any of it. He said he had his own reputation to think about and couldn't afford to be associated with this mess. I felt completely abandoned by everyone involved. Ryan had destroyed my reputation and then disappeared. Marcus had used the situation for his own entertainment and then bailed when there were consequences. And my friends had turned their backs on me when I needed support the most. I tried to rebuild my social life by meeting new people who didn't know about the incident, but it was harder than I expected. Dating became nearly impossible because the photos still showed up in search results of my name. Potential partners would find the images and either ghost me immediately or bring them up in uncomfortable ways. My family found out about everything when my aunt saw one of the shares on Facebook. The conversation with my parents was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. They couldn't understand how I'd thought such a plan was appropriate, and they were mortified that their friends and neighbors might see the photos. I started drinking more to cope with the isolation and embarrassment. Wine with lunch became normal, and I'd often find myself drunk and scrolling through social media by mid-afternoon, seeing how everyone else's lives were moving forward while mine had completely stalled. 6 months later, I'm sitting alone in my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, drinking wine and swiping through dating apps with no real intention of meeting anyone. Every profile I look at reminds me either of Ryan or Marcus, and I find myself comparing every potential match to what I used to have. I miss Ryan more than I want to admit. Not just the relationship, but the way he used to look at me like I was the most important person in his world. He was sweet and attentive, and genuinely cared about making me happy. I threw that away because I got bored and wanted excitement. Looking back, I can see that Ryan was actually a really good boyfriend. He was reliable, honest, loyal, and completely devoted to me. He brought me coffee in bed on weekends, remembered important dates, and always made time for me, even when his work schedule was crazy. I dismissed all of that as boring when really it was exactly what a healthy relationship looked like. The more time passes, the more I realize that I might have ruined the best thing I ever had. Ryan wasn't inexperienced because he was inadequate. He was inexperienced because he'd been waiting for the right person to share those intimate moments with, and I repaid his trust and vulnerability by humiliating him in the worst way possible. I started going to therapy to try to understand why I'd thought my plan was acceptable. My therapist helped me see that I'd been prioritizing excitement and control over genuine intimacy and respect. She said I'd treated Ryan like a project to be improved rather than a partner to be cherished. Through months of painful self-reflection, I began to understand that my relationship with Marcus had been toxic in ways I'd never acknowledged. Marcus was confident and experienced, but he was also selfish and manipulative. He'd made me feel special by comparison to other women, but he'd never actually cared about my feelings or well-being. I'd idealized Marcus because the drama and intensity felt like passion, but really, it was just dysfunction. Ryan's steadiness and reliability hadn't been boring. It had been mature and healthy. I'd confused genuine love with performance and validation. The hardest part was admitting that I'd been the problem in our relationship. Ryan had been trying his best to make me happy, and I'd responded by planning something that would devastate and humiliate him. I'd convinced myself I was being helpful, when really I was being cruel and selfish. I tried writing letters to Ryan apologizing for what I'd done, but I never sent them because I realized they were more about making myself feel better than actually helping him heal. He deserved to move on without having to deal with my guilt and regret. I'd already put him through enough. I started scrolling through old photos of Ryan and me on my phone, looking at how happy we'd been in the beginning. In every picture, he's looking at me with such genuine love and adoration. And I'm looking at the camera, always performing, always aware of how we appeared to other people, rather than just enjoying the moment. I can see now that Ryan was completely committed to our relationship, while I was already 1 foot out the door, looking for reasons why it wasn't good enough. I'd sabotaged something real because I was too immature and selfish to appreciate what I had. The isolation has given me time to think about what I really want from life and relationships. I realize now that excitement and passion aren't the same thing as love and commitment. Real love is showing up consistently, being vulnerable and honest, putting your partner's well being before your own ego. I didn't just lose Ryan that night. I lost the chance to be the person I thought I was, someone kind and supportive and worthy of being loved. Instead, I became someone cruel and selfish and destructive, someone who would betray trust for the sake of feeling superior and in control. Now, I'm the one who needs lessons in how not to ruin your own life, in how to appreciate good things before you destroy them, in how to be a person worth loving instead of someone who uses love as a weapon against the people who care about you most. I didn't realize Ryan was the best thing I had until he saw me at my worst. And by then, it was too